Hello everyone, it's Callum here and welcome back to another Pack 1 Pick 1, where I bust open a Monarch booster pack, take a look at what's inside and give you my thoughts at what I would take if I was sitting down to do a draft. Then other members of the LSS team are going to come in here and give you their opinions, and we'll see what everybody would first pick. Last time there was a wide variety of different opinions, and feel free to sound off in the comments who you agree with or if you would take something different entirely. Alright, let's see what's in this pack. I can get it open, move the token out of the way, and spread it out here. Alright, I'm going to put these into classes. The generics up here, and the talent cards. Okay. Ooh, a foil rift bind. Ooh, nice piece of equipment. A rare herald, and a glisten. Okay, well, this is an interesting pack here. There's a lot of good options. Mostly, as you can see, there's a decent number of light cards, and there's some good Runeblade cards here. Red Riftbind's always a nice one. There's a Hooves of the Shadow Beast as our equipment. This is a fantastic piece of equipment for a Leviathan deck. I'm not going to say it's like 100% necessary, but you really want one of these just to be able to close out the game. I definitely think it's first pickable, and the other good thing about it is there's not a lot of other good Leviathan cards in this pack. And there's not a lot of shadow cards in general, talent cards. So you could probably be reasonably certain that if you took this card, that you wouldn't be passing any good brute cards to your left. That said, there are some other very powerful cards in here. Glisten is very powerful. I found that just being able to stack up counters onto a spectral shield as Prism and just protecting it all game and hitting with it, in this case it would be for 7 each turn, that's a perfectly viable game plan. So Glisten is a potential first pick as well. There's also a Red Herald of Triumph, which is an excellent card for Prism. So some great kind of Prism picks here. There's not a lot else that I would consider for Bolton, or you could potentially go into Chain and hope to wheel something, but I think honestly my first pick is going to be Hooves of the Shadow Beast, because it looks like if I take this, all the rest of the drafters on my left are going to be kind of getting signals to go into Light or maybe into Runeblade, and I'll be able to cut off all of the brute cards and hopefully build a really nice Leviathan deck. But yep, let's see what everybody else thinks.
Alright, so I open my pack, and at first glance I see this pack to be very weak compared to other packs, just because, one, there's not many strong generic cards in the pool, and two, there is a lot of class cards. So I will stay away from the class cards as my first pick, as always, because I want to be open to playing any other deck. So I believe the first pick I would choose is Warmonger's Recital, as a pump, and is pretty much it's a recyclable effect.
All right, this is a very interesting pack. We have 3 Runeblade, only 1 brute card, 2 each of the light hero classes. So yeah, looking at this, it's really interesting to note that there's not many generics. Kind of like you're staying open options, only the Recital here. Glisten is a really powerful card for both Bolton and Prism. This card can just outright win you the game. It's kind of like the attack reaction type thing. Foil Riftbind, probably my favorite out of the set. But yeah, the cards I'm kind of looking at are Take Flight, really crucial for Bolton. Herald, Red Herald is great. And the Hooves. The Hooves, I feel like, is one of these cards that is just a key for Brute to do well. And looking that there's only one Brute card, I'm feeling if I pick the Hooves here, it just gives a signal, a straight signal to the people on my left that they're getting shipped all the light cards here, and that I can just cut this and cut the Brute and just commit to Brute here. So yeah, I'm just going to straight up pick the Hooves and commit to Levia.
All right, welcome to Pack 1 Pick 1. I'm Jacob. So this is the pack that we're looking at here today. First off the back, the first thing I noticed, a lot of nice yellow light cards. Not the most exciting things ever, but definitely some solid playables. Blinding Beam, obviously very good versus some of the Shadow Heroes, while still having some utility, especially in Prism. Being able to pitch one card, activate the hero ability, and play the Blinding Beam is not bad. We see that we got two options for each of the class cards, for both Warrior and Illusionist. Solid Generic and Warmonger's Recital. Just very strong in Bolton, just being able to give it a pump so you're able to give it go again with your hero ability, as well as it's just sometimes very strong to, in Leviathan for example, to attack them with a strong attack draw on the bottom, just keeping the density of threats in your deck very high. Or like we got this nice beautiful foil Riftbind here, and putting that back on the bottom so you're able to hit it with Shoal Shackles does have some utility as well. So off the bat, I think I'm not really liking the Dark so much. You could pick the Brute card to try and signal to your left that you're going to be in Shadow, because there's nothing of that class there. I really don't like first picking this section here, just because it's the two. If you took the red Riftbind, you're left with two medium blues to try and wheel around, so it's not really worth the risk there. So I think we can easily just bin off this trash over here, which leaves us with this. So going from the generics, blue, the Yinti, it's a fine card. Most of the time in Prism it's a blue block 3, but I think there's definitely some better options. We're not going to take that. The class cards for Bolton are pretty medium. Take Flight is a very strong class card. Preferably I'm after the red or blue version though. Red Herald of Triumph is a very strong Illusionist card, and definitely worth considering. But something that really takes my eye is this yellow Glisten here. Glisten is a very strong card. Interact very well with Prism's Iris of Reality, which is during your action phase, illusions you control become auras with pay 3, attack for 4, and with go again, which means that you're able just to turn your auras into beat sticks. But because of the way that it's worded, Glisten removes the counters at the end of turn. So at the end of the turn, your auras are no longer weapons, so the counters don't get removed by Glisten. Very cool interaction. And it's one of the very few pump spells in this format, which is very good for catching people out, and it makes it very easy to push through lethal damage. As well as it being a yellow, it's a decent pitch card early on. And taking this means that we're left with a lot of open lanes, kind of similar to this Warmonger's Recital, but I definitely think the power level of this Glisten is much higher than Warmonger's Recital. So I'm going to go ahead and lock in this yellow Glisten, Herald of Triumph.
Okay, so looking at this pack here, I can see the cards have been sort of split up into class and light and shadow and generics. Immediately what I kind of see is the Glisten, which is very strong in Prism. So you can put those +1/+1 counters onto your spectral shields and sort of really overwhelm someone at times. Blinding Beam also quite solid. The Seek Enlightenment, slightly underwhelming I feel as a yellow. The one issue I'd have with taking something like Glisten early is we also have a red Herald of Triumph and a blue Herald of Tenacity, so that would put other players potentially into Prism as well, which you could be fighting with later. The Warrior cards, I mean, they're okay, nothing special. For the chain cards, potentially I'd be looking at like something like the red Riftbind here. There are only other blue copies of chain cards in there, so you could look to take the red Riftbind and try and really force that early chain deck with a lot of Blood Debt, Seeds of Agony, that kind of thing. But although I think what I would consider here is, because there's only one brute card in this pack apart from the equipment, and that's the Dread Screamer, and it's yellow, so it's not that red, doesn't have that 6 power. So one thing I'm actually really eyeing up is this Who's the Shadow Beast, because I wonder if I can take this pick one, pack one, just immediately go into the deck. I feel like Levia is not as popular potentially as some of the heroes, at least in this early stage in the game. So I could take that and sort of really look to force brute very early, cut everything off. I'm not sending any signals. There's not really strong shadow cards. There's not strong brute cards. So you know what? I'm just going to commit, pick one, pack one. I'm taking Who's of the Shadow Beast.
Alrighty, Sasha here, and we're here for Monarch Pack 1, Pick 1. Looking at this display of cards, what I usually like to do at the very first pack is try to take the biggest risk possible if there's value to be found. Otherwise, I will be very, very conservative. Looking at these cards, nothing necessarily stands out too much. The most powerful card on its own accord is probably the Hooves, Herald, and that's probably about it. The rest you kind of need to synergize with a few things. Something that really stands out to me is Blinding Beam as well as a light card. Even though I pretty much only play it in Illusionist, just to effectively dodge the downside of Phantasm and push some damage through. But if they don't have the 6s to defend, it's not very good, but still kind of hype. This Riftbind's also foil, which is always a factor. But less of that. So just looking at what we have here, there is kind of this low amount of availability for Shadow. Light is popping off on the left. Glisten's very powerful, one of the few attack reaction type cards in the format. I kind of like the Blinding Beam to push into Illusionist because just getting that first soul and creating that Spectral Shield is so important, and that's one of the key cards that does it. But otherwise, Eclipse Existence is pretty solid as a card against those light decks, and if we're passing a lot of light cards and not too many good other cards, like these cards are fine just because they're blue and chain. But yeah, I'm thinking of taking the Eclipse Existence and hoping that I can kind of punish these other guys, especially because there's a lot of higher density good light cards here.
Alright, first thing let's do is let's look at the rares that we have, and we've got two very good ones, Glisten and Herald of Triumph. And I'm going to actually just pull all of the cards that are like quite good. Let's put it down to the top. So cards at the bottom is like not as ideal. Both Riftbinds are pretty nice. Hooves is nice. We have the Herald. Dread Screamer is very important, and Take Flight is fine. So overall, this pack, it's interesting. There's not much going on in terms of like good generics or good shadow light cards, but there's a little bit going for every single class. So we actually just split it up. So one thing to note is both these Dread Screamer and Hooves is very important if you're playing Brute to have both these cards. Riftbind obviously very crucial in chain decks, and we also just have some very powerful Illusionist cards. So my initial thinking would always be this Glisten, because it's one of the most powerful cards that's not attached to anything. We don't really want to be first picking a warmonger recital here, and I don't really see us picking a Take Flight. However, one of the more powerful actual class cards will probably be somewhere like this Herald of Triumph is very powerful, this Hooves is very powerful, and the Riftbind is very powerful. If I got this pack here, I think I will lean towards either picking the Hooves. Hopefully the Dread Screamer comes back, but it is really nice that it's quite hard for someone to see this pack and feel like there's much going on. Or I will take the Glisten here, but we are shipping some really nice Illusionists and also one viable warrior. So I would say it's very close, but I'm going to pick the Hooves of the Shadow Beast.
Hey there folks, James White here with a pack one, pick one. This pack strikes me as being at the lower end of the power spectrum. In particular, when I look at the cards that are going to give me some flexibility here, this Warmonger's Recital is pretty solid. Like, it leaves you open to all four classes, so it's a very reasonable pack one, pick one.
and it's it does some work. This glisten is pretty solid. I'm often happy to first pick a glisten. I do like the red glisten the most, but the yellow glisten is pretty solid, and it does. This card is incredible in both Bolton and in Prism, and I do love drafting the Prism decks where you just like load up the counters on the Spectral Shield and try and ride it to victory, protecting it at all costs. So these are definitely some legitimate first pick options. The Dredge Screamer, the red Dredge Screamer, a great card because it has 6 power. This one not so much. These two cards are playable but not first pickable for Bolton. Down here for Chain, not impressed with these cards as first picks. The Riftbind, definitely a card that can be first picked. Some workhorses for the Prism deck, but I'm not over the moon about first picking that stuff. This card here, definitely not first picking it, and neither would I these two cards. Yinti Yanti, solid on Prism and Chain, definitely being a blue generic that defends for 3, but I'm not first picking that card. So it really leaves us with these. The Riftbind and the Hooves are the two cards that really stand out to me as being the most powerful, but obviously it's committing into a particular hero. And that's okay. Sometimes you can first pick a hero specific card and then see what comes and change. That's totally legit. Well, these two cards that are going to give you flexibility to stay open. If it was me and I'm drafting this pack, I really like the fact that the only other solid Leviathan card in this pack is the Dredge Screamer, and so when I say solid, it's like middling, is average. So if I take this Hooves here, I'm not passing anything to my left which is interesting at all for a Leviathan drafter. So I like the Hooves here. It is, in my opinion, the most powerful card in this pack, and it's sending a very clear signal to my left that there's no Leviathan getting past. Hooves of the Shadow Beast, pack 1, pick 1.